Settle down and get started. Okay, thank you so much. We've got our chief guests have arrived. Excellent. Thank you so much. So we are going to start with the speeches. I request that the band, if they can just take leave, or if you can, I think we'll need to move the drums so that when guests are coming to speak, they can navigate the space. If we can help to move the drum a little bit. But let's get started because I know we are all pushed for time. So if you can settle down and then we get started. Honorable Nyale Kaba, Minister of State and Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation, represented by Chief of Staff in the Ministry, Dr. Nahua Yeo, the President of the African Development Bank Group, Dr. Sidi Olta, represented by Hassatun Sele, the Vice President for Finance and the Chief Financial Officer, Evaluator General of the Independent Development Evaluation here at the African Development Bank, Karen Not Munsterman, Executive Director, Senior Management, staff, ladies and gentlemen. So welcome to the 7th Evaluation Week. And before I continue, let me make this a little bit interactive, this introduction a little bit interactive, and tease our memory and see how much we can remember. So if you've been with the bank just for 1 day and up to 10 years, can I see your hand go up? Anybody who's been in the bank, just 1 day to 10 years. Let's see. Just about 10 people, okay. 10 to 20 years, between that period, 10 to 20 years. Only one? The two? Then three. So you two, I'll come to you right now because, and those of you also who raise your hands for 1 day to 10 years. When was the first evaluation week held? And I will give you multiple choices. So 2010, 2014, 2015, or 2016? Anybody who can guess quickly. And don't check your phone's WhatsApp or Google, please, or AI. When was the first evaluation week held? 2012, 2010, 2010? Anybody else? 2014? Okay, I will tell you when it was. Let me go to the next question. And in which city was it held? Was it here in Abidjan? Was it in Yamoussoukro? Was it in Nairobi? Was it in Tunis? Tunis, anybody from Nairobi, Abidjan, Yamoussoukro? Abidjan. So the first question, the answer is 2012. That was when the first evaluation week was held, and it was in Tunis. So let's give ourselves a round of applause for those answers, and we can go and just check these things. And the thing is that that evaluation week was held 14 years ago in Tunis, and the first ever to be held in Abidjan was in November 2016. So this year marks actually the 10th anniversary of the evaluation week since it relocated from Tunis to Abidjan. So on that note, may I say, Akwaba, bienvenue, welcome, Maraban Bikum Jamian, Benvinda todos voices, karibuni sana. Now, I had the privilege of going back into the archives to look at the photos and videos taken at that time in 2016. And the faces of colleagues that I see here, I saw them in those photos, and by the way, in the videos, I've seen your photos and videos, and I compared them to how you look like today. And in this same city, Abidjan, and I tell you what, this city, Abidjan, has looked after you very well. Honestly, let's give it to them. It's because of the hospitality and the general people of what is the world's leading cocoa producer, Côte d'Ivoire. So distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, this is also the first evaluation week under the bank's new leadership of President Dr. Sidi Oulta. And this edition comes as the bank ushers in a new strategic vision anchored on the 4 cardinal points. 1, unlocking Africa's capital power. Number 2, rebuilding Africa's financial sovereignty. Cardinal point number 3, turning Africa's demographics into an economic dividend. And number 4, building resilient infrastructure and competitive value chains. So this is a great year, and I believe you are all determined to make this a memorable evaluation week with a theme, catalyzing impact across Africa's borders. During this session, ladies and gentlemen, the opening session, the artists will explore the current state of Africa's regional integration, covering progress made, emerging opportunities, and of course, persistent bottlenecks. This is a hybrid event, and so participants are joining via Zoom. Please check to make sure your mic is muted unless I give you the chance to speak. And then also we have interpretation services in English and in French. Those are the 2 official languages of the bank. For our online audience, all you need to do is to click on that globe icon and choose your preferred language. And during the question and answer sessions, by the way, please in this room, raise your hands and I'll come to you very quickly. And time permitting, I'll also give those online a chance to put in their comments. We are actually beginning to get quite a number of comments on that. You'll get a recording of this session, of this event. It's a 3-day event. You'll get a recording of that on the website IDEV.AfDB.org. But also we can give you a more personalized one through your email address. So let us get started. I would like to welcome Karen Roth-Munsterman, the Evaluator General of the Independent Development Evaluation here at the African Development Bank to give us the welcome remarks. Karen, please. Let's give a round of applause to Karen.
Thank you very much, Solomon. Dr. Yeo Noah, representative of Her Excellency Ms. Niale Kaba, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Côte d'Ivoire, Ms. Hassatou Nsele, Vice President of the African Development Bank Group, representing Dr. Sidi Oulta, President of the African Development Bank Group, Your Excellencies, heads of diplomatic missions and representatives of regional and international organizations accredited in Côte d'Ivoire, distinguished members of the African Development Bank Board of Directors, members of senior management, dear partners, colleagues, participants, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Good morning. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the 2026 African Development Bank Development Evaluation Week. On behalf of Independent Development Evaluation, IDEV, I warmly welcome all of you joining us here in Abidjan and online. The biennial evaluation week represents more than a moment in our institutional calendar. It is an opportunity to reflect on how evaluation and evidence more broadly can support better decisions, stronger partnerships, and improved development results. It also allows us to ask not only what we are doing, but how well we are doing it, what we are learning, and what we can improve. This year's Evaluation Week, convened under the theme Catalyzing Development Impact Across Africa's Borders, speaks to Africa's integration agenda. Through the AU's Agenda 2063, the African Continental Free Trade Area, and the AfDB's 10-year strategy 2024-2033, the vision is clear: a more integrated, prosperous, resilient, and inclusive Africa. But vision is not enough. Turning regional integration ambition into results requires political will, action at various levels, implementation capacity, and credible and timely evidence. Cross-border work is complex. A strong regional strategy depends not only on financing and infrastructure, but also on how countries coordinate, how institutions collaborate, how policies align, and how people, communities, and firms actually experience the changes on the ground. A transport corridor will not deliver its full benefits if border procedures remain inefficient. A power interconnection will not transform markets if regulatory arrangements are weak. A trade agreement will not automatically create opportunities if firms lack finance, information, or productive capacity. Evaluations of regional infrastructure, energy interconnections, and multi-country programs teach us that physical investments must be accompanied by regulatory harmonization, institutional coordination, and governance mechanisms to sustain results. This was also echoed during the discussions at recent AfDB annual meetings in Brazzaville. Ladies and gentlemen, we meet at a time when credible evidence is more important than ever. Around the world, public debate is increasingly shaped by misinformation, disinformation, selective use of facts, and declining trust in institutions. Information is abundant, but not always reliable. Technology, including artificial intelligence, is advancing rapidly, but it does not automatically lead to better decisions. If anything, it makes the principles underpinning independent evaluation, legitimacy, impartiality, integrity, sound judgment, reliability, transparency, more important, not less. In this context, independent evaluation has a special responsibility. It provides a robust evidence base that can be tested, questioned, verified, and used. It assesses performance to promote accountability and learning. It proposes lessons and recommendations that can enhance development effectiveness. It encourages a focus on development results and continuous quality improvement. At IDEV, our work is guided by the principles of the bank's independent evaluation policy: independence, credibility, impartiality, and transparency, usefulness, and partnership. These principles are not abstract. They shape how we work. The balance is important. Independence does not mean isolation. To be useful, evaluation must respond to concrete knowledge needs, asking the questions to which people seek answers. It must be close enough to understand the topic being examined and the decisions being made, but independent enough to provide candid, impartial, objective evidence. It must engage with users over the course of the process to ensure their needs are being met. Evaluation must be timely, relevant, and useful to decision makers and practitioners. While often seen as retrospective, evaluation can also provide just-in-time evidence for key decision moments by synthesizing lessons, validating results, testing assumptions, and identifying risks early, without compromising on rigor. For IDEV, this means working closely with the bank's board of directors, management, and staff to deliver independent evidence when it is most needed to inform policies, strategies, operations, and processes. Ladies and gentlemen, to realize Africa's integration ambitions, we must connect ambition with evidence, commitment with implementation, and strategy with results. This year's Evaluation Week focuses on cross-border development impact, from economic corridors and regional public goods to trade and investment, demographic opportunities, labor mobility, climate action, and partnerships. These are development priorities, but they are also evaluation questions. What evidence do we have on what is working, what is not, and why? Are we collecting the right data and analyzing it appropriately? What lessons are we drawing and applying? And are we adapting sufficiently when evidence shows the need to change course? Over the next 2 days, I encourage all of us to engage not only as participants, but also as users of evidence, asking how evaluation findings can inform strategies, improve operations, strengthen processes and partnerships, and support lasting impact. Evaluation is most powerful when it leads to action. In closing, I would like to thank the bank's board of directors, senior management, colleagues, partners, speakers, moderators, participants, and the IDEV team for making this dialogue possible. May this week help us to turn credible, timely, and useful evidence into better decisions and better development results for Africa. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Karen, the Evaluator General of the Independent Development Evaluation here at the African Development Bank. And once again, let's appreciate what Karen just told us, because look, when just listening to some of the words she shared with us, very important to say we live in a world of misinformation, disinformation, fake news is all over. We need reliable information that can support sound decision-making. And of course, emphasizing the role of IDEV, the Independent Development Evaluation, and that does not exist in isolation, is there to provide candid and impartial evidence to support timely and useful input to decision-making. So once again, another round of applause for Karen, please. Okay, next let's move to, let's welcome on stage Hassatu Nsele. Hassatu is here to represent the President of the African Development Bank Group, Dr. Sidi Oldster. So Vice President Hassatu Nsele, please, welcome.
Thank you very much. Son Excellence, Madame Niale Kaba, ministre d'État, ministre des Affaires étrangères et de la coopération internationale de la République de Côte d'Ivoire, représentée par le docteur Yeo Nawa, directeur du cabinet du ministre d'État, ministre des Affaires étrangères et de la coopération internationale. Mesdames et Messieurs les administrateurs du groupe de la Banque africaine de développement, membres de la haute direction, Madame l'évaluatrice générale, distingués partenaires, chers collègues participants, Mesdames et Messieurs. J'ai l'honneur de prononcer cette allocution au nom du président Sidi Oulta, le docteur Sidi Oulta qui vous adresse ses salutations chaleureuses. La semaine de l'évaluation du développement de la Banque africaine de développement nous offre l'occasion de réfléchir et de réaffirmer notre engagement collectif en faveur de l'utilisation de données probantes pour contribuer de manière mesurable au développement et à la transformation de l'Afrique. La Banque africaine de développement porte une responsabilité importante. Veiller à ce que, à travers ses priorités stratégiques, ainsi que la manière dont elle déploie ses financements, ses partenariats et ses connaissances, les données probantes issues de l'évaluation soient systématiquement placées au cœur de la prise de décision. Et de plus, réinvesties dans ces opérations afin de répondre aux priorités et aux défis de développement en constante évolution dans ces pays membres régionaux. Mesdames et Messieurs, au fil des années, la Banque africaine de développement a réalisé d'importants investissements dans les infrastructures régionales, dans les systèmes énergétiques et la connectivité numérique, reconnaissant qu'ils constituent les fondements mêmes de l'intégration. À titre d'exemple, entre 2004 et 2022, nous avons financé les tronçons principaux et connexes de 25 corridors routiers stratégiques à travers le continent, notamment le corridor Mombasa-Nairobi-Addis Abeba en Afrique de l'Est, l'autoroute transsaharienne entre Alger et Lagos, reliant ainsi le Maghreb et le Sahel, ainsi que le corridor Dakar-Abidjan-Lagos. Au total, ce sont 13,5 milliards de dollars qui ont été investis dans plus de 18 000 kilomètres de routes, bénéficiant à 307 millions de personnes. Par ailleurs, la BAD contribue au développement du commerce régional à travers divers projets de facilitation du commerce et du transport, et en conduisant des études pour de nouveaux développements routiers. Nous investissons également, nous avons investi, ou plutôt nous sommes en train d'investir, plusieurs milliards de dollars dans la construction de ports et chemins de fer à travers le continent, reliant des pays à des zones à fort potentiel agricole ou riches en ressources minières. Par exemple, le chemin de fer de 400 km entre Tabora et Kigoma en Tanzanie en est un exemple. Ce projet d'une valeur de 2,3 milliards de dollars reliera le port de Dar es Salaam sur l'océan Indien au port de Mwanza sur le lac Victoria. Et de là, la ligne s'étendra vers les pays voisins, le Rwanda, le Burundi et la République démocratique du Congo et l'Ouganda, libérant ainsi un important potentiel économique régional grâce à la création de nouveaux corridors miniers et agricoles en Afrique orientale. Alors, tous ces investissements témoignent du rôle central joué par notre institution dans la promotion de l'intégration régionale, la réduction de la fragmentation et des coûts de transaction, la réalisation d'économies d'échelle et le renforcement de la compétitivité mondiale. Donc, adossé à des infrastructures solides, à la cohérence des politiques, à des capacités institutionnelles renforcées, à une meilleure coordination et un engagement politique soutenu, de tels investissements peuvent stimuler une croissance industrielle tirée par le commerce intra-africain, favoriser le développement des chaînes de valeur, créer les emplois et améliorer les conditions de vie des populations. Mesdames et messieurs, dans la planification, la conception et la mise en œuvre de ces opérations, nous nous appuyons sur une base de connaissances riches, travaux analytiques, expertise et compétences de notre personnel, décennies d'expérience ainsi que de données probantes issues des évaluations indépendantes. Et en examinant objectivement ce qui a fonctionné, ce qui n'a pas fonctionné et pourquoi, nous pouvons tirer de précieux enseignements pour orienter nos futures interventions et ce qui contribuera à renforcer la mise en œuvre et à améliorer les performances. L'évaluation nous aide à déterminer si les investissements dans les infrastructures matérielles et immatérielles ont effectivement généré les effets attendus en matière de commerce, d'industrialisation, de création d'emplois et de croissance inclusive, et aussi si la transformation est réellement à l'œuvre. Mais l'évaluation ne se limite pas à la redevabilité. Elle est aussi un outil de gestion au service de l'apprentissage, de l'adaptation et d'une meilleure prise de décision, en particulier en réponse à l'évolution des priorités de nos pays membres régionaux. Les évaluations réalisées par IDEV, couvrant l'ensemble des politiques, stratégies, opérations et processus de la banque, démontrent la pertinence, la capacité d'adaptation et l'importance stratégique de notre engagement. Toutefois, les enseignements qui en découlent sont tout aussi clairs. Pour promouvoir l'intégration et amplifier l'impact du développement à grande échelle, nous devons passer d'une logique de projets nationaux isolés à celle de systèmes régionaux intégrés. Leur efficacité repose sur une planification coordonnée, de cadres opérationnels communs et d'une optimisation continue au-delà des frontières. Par ailleurs, les infrastructures à elles seules ne suffisent pas. Les progrès régionaux exigent des cadres réglementaires harmonisés, des structures de gouvernance coordonnées et des objectifs de performance partagés. En qualité de partenaire de confiance, la Banque africaine de développement est bien placée pour collaborer avec les communautés économiques régionales et d'autres partenaires à la promotion de ces objectifs. Nous demeurons résolument engagés à soutenir nos pays membres et les institutions régionales dans le renforcement des capacités nécessaires à la mise en œuvre de ce programme. Et tout en veillant, bien entendu, à ce que les résultats de développement soient inclusifs et durables. Nous ne pouvons ignorer l'évolution rapide du contexte mondial du développement, les bouleversements géopolitiques, le resserrement de l'espace budgétaire et les pressions climatiques croissantes se font de plus en plus sentir. Et dans ce contexte, les réformes menées dans un seul pays ou une seule institution ne suffiront pas si elles ne sont pas portées à l'échelle étendue au-delà des frontières. Dès lors, la question n'est pas de savoir si l'Afrique peut se transformer, mais si nous sommes capables d'accélérer cette transformation avec rapidité, avec cohérence et avec détermination. La nouvelle orientation de la Banque africaine de développement réaffirme ses priorités traditionnelles tout en accordant une attention accrue au financement, aux institutions, à la démographie et à la résilience climatique. Elle renforcera la capacité de la banque à mobiliser des ressources à grande échelle pour le développement du continent et aussi à répondre aux défis émergents. L'Afrique doit donc faire preuve d'agilité, elle doit diversifier ses économies, renforcer sa résilience et approfondir la coopération régionale. La banque doit s'adapter en devenant plus innovante, en devenant plus catalytique et en tirant parti de ses partenariats, en mobilisant des financements et en réduisant les risques, en attirant les investissements privés et en utilisant les données probantes pour transformer les opportunités régionales en investissements bancables, évolutifs et axés sur les résultats. Mesdames et messieurs, la transformation de l'Afrique ne sera pas déterminée uniquement par les circonstances. Elle sera déterminée par le leadership et les choix que nous ferons. Nous devons agir avec détermination en réinvestissant systématiquement les enseignements tirés des évaluations dans nos stratégies, dans nos opérations, dans nos partenariats et nos réformes, afin de passer de l'ambition à la mise en œuvre, de la fragmentation à l'intégration et de progrès isolés à un impact systémique à grande échelle. En nous appuyant sur les données probantes dont nous disposons, saisissons cette semaine, la semaine de l'évaluation du développement de la Banque africaine de développement, comme une occasion de réaffirmer notre ambition collective, de renforcer notre détermination et d'accélérer les progrès vers une Afrique plus intégrée, plus résiliente et plus prospère. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Vice President Assatu Nsele there, representing Dr. Sidi Ould-Tah, the President of the African Development Bank. And we are hearing there in summary the bank's enormous investment in robust infrastructure and its focus on regional integration. The bank, of course, cautioning against isolated national projects in favor of course, regional projects that promote integration. And the bank should become more innovative, catalytic, and build more partnerships that can lead to bankable projects. So once again, a very big round of applause for Vice President Assatu. Thank you so much for those remarks. It's now time, ladies and gentlemen, to hear from our chief guest. As we said, Minister Nyale Kaba is represented here by Dr. Yeo. Dr. Yeo, depuis février 2026, Dr. Yeo occupait le poste du directeur du cabinet du ministre d'État, ministre des Affaires étrangères et de la coopération internationale. Il a reçu en 2020 la distinction du commandeur dans l'ordre du mérite de la fonction publique de la République de Côte d'Ivoire. Let's welcome him to deliver his remarks. Merci beaucoup. Bienvenue.
Madame Assatou Diop Nsele, vice-présidente chargée des finances et directrice financière du groupe de la Banque africaine de développement, représentant le président du groupe de la Banque africaine de développement, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, les chefs de mission diplomatiques et représentants des organisations régionales et internationales accréditées en Côte d'Ivoire, Madame Karen Roth-Monsterman, j'espère que je n'ai pas écorché, évaluatrice générale de la Banque africaine de développement. Mesdames et Messieurs, les membres du conseil d'administration de la Banque africaine de développement, Mesdames et Messieurs, les membres de la haute direction du groupe de la Banque africaine de développement, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants du secteur privé et des organisations de la société civile, Mesdames et Messieurs les experts, les praticiens du développement, évaluateurs, chercheurs, partenaires au développement, Mesdames et Messieurs, tout protocole respecté. C'est pour moi un réel honneur de prendre la parole au nom de Madame Nialé Kaba, ministre d'État, ministre des Affaires étrangères et de la coopération internationale, à l'occasion de l'ouverture de l'édition 2026 de la semaine de l'évaluation du développement de la Banque africaine de développement. Je voudrais tout d'abord traduire les sincères félicitations du ministre d'État au groupe de la Banque africaine de développement, en particulier au président, au conseil d'administration, la haute direction ainsi qu'à l'évaluatrice générale pour l'organisation de cette importante rencontre. Je souhaite également la bienvenue à l'ensemble des participants réunis à Abidjan et ceux qui nous suivent en ligne depuis les différentes régions du continent et au-delà. Le thème retenu cette année, catalyser l'impact du développement au-delà des frontières en Afrique, est particulièrement pertinent. Il intervient à un moment où l'Afrique est appelée à accélérer son intégration économique, à renforcer sa résilience et à transformer son potentiel en prospérité partagée. Distingués participants, mesdames et messieurs, l'histoire récente nous enseigne une vérité simple. Aucun pays ne peut relever seul les grands défis de notre époque. La sécurité, les infrastructures, l'énergie, le changement climatique, la gestion des ressources naturelles, la mobilité humaine, l'emploi des jeunes, la santé, la transformation industrielle ou encore la sécurité alimentaire dépassent largement le cadre des frontières nationales. Nos économies sont interdépendantes, nos défis sont communs et nos solutions doivent être collectives. La coopération et l'intégration africaine ne doivent plus être un horizon lointain. Elles doivent devenir une réalité tangible pour nos populations. C'est pourquoi l'intégration régionale demeure l'un des leviers les plus puissants dont dispose l'Afrique pour accélérer sa transformation économique et sociale. Notre pays, la Côte d'Ivoire, de par sa position géographique et sa stabilité, constitue un acteur majeur de la dynamique d'intégration. Carrefour économique, plateforme logistique, pôle d'investissement et porte d'accès aux marchés régionaux et internationaux, la Côte d'Ivoire entretient avec ses voisins des liens historiques, humains et économiques profonds. Les échanges qui traversent nos frontières soutiennent la croissance, créent des emplois et contribuent à la prospérité de millions de citoyens dans toute la sous-région. En effet, la Côte d'Ivoire est membre actif de la CEDEAO, de l'UEMOA, de l'Union africaine et des Nations unies. Elle a également été parmi les premiers États à ratifier l'accord portant création de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine. Nous sommes convaincus que des institutions régionales et continentales fortes, des marchés plus intégrés et des infrastructures mieux connectées sont indispensables à la réalisation des ambitions de l'agenda 2063 de l'Union africaine. Mesdames et messieurs, les résultats observés à travers le continent africain démontrent que l'intégration régionale produit des bénéfices concrets lorsqu'elle est portée par des investissements adaptés, des politiques cohérentes et des institutions efficaces, comme l'a dit ma prédécesseur sur ce pupitre. Les corridors de transport facilitent les échanges commerciaux et réduisent les coûts logistiques. Les interconnexions énergétiques améliorent l'accès à l'électricité et renforcent la sécurité énergétique. Les infrastructures numériques rapprochent les marchés et stimulent l'innovation. Les chaînes de valeur favorisent l'industrialisation et la création d'emplois. La coopération régionale contribue également à renforcer la résilience de nos pays face aux crises économiques, climatiques, sanitaires ou sécuritaires. La Côte d'Ivoire en fait l'expérience au quotidien. Cette ambition se traduit notamment à travers plusieurs initiatives régionales structurantes auxquelles le pays participe activement. À titre illustratif, on peut citer donc le renforcement des interconnexions énergétiques régionales, l'ambitieux projet du corridor Dakar-Abidjan-Lagos, la mise en œuvre de la ZLECAf et tous ces projets que la vice-présidente de la Banque africaine de développement a rappelé tout à l'heure et pour lesquels la Côte d'Ivoire a toujours mis en avant son savoir-faire et son implication pour la réussite de ces projets. Nous devons poursuivre et intensifier nos efforts collectifs afin de développer davantage les capacités de transformation, de favoriser les échanges intra-africains et de mieux valoriser le potentiel humain et les richesses produites sur notre continent. Mesdames et messieurs, pour renforcer l'intégration régionale, l'évaluation et les enseignements qu'elle produit doivent guider notre action et éclairer nos décisions. C'est tout le sens de cette semaine de l'évaluation du développement. Les citoyens attendent que les politiques publiques produisent des résultats tangibles, une réduction des coûts du commerce, davantage d'opportunités pour les jeunes et les femmes, des infrastructures plus performantes et une amélioration durable des conditions de vie. C'est précisément ces résultats que l'évaluation permet d'apprécier. Elle permet d'identifier de manière impartiale ce qui fonctionne, de comprendre les facteurs de succès et d'échec, de corriger ce qui doit l'être et d'orienter plus efficacement l'action publique. Elle constitue ainsi un outil essentiel d'apprentissage, de redevabilité et d'amélioration continue au service du développement. En Côte d'Ivoire, cette approche guide déjà l'action publique dans plusieurs domaines. En effet, le gouvernement s'est engagé dans un processus d'institutionnalisation de l'évaluation des projets, programmes et politiques de développement. Cette volonté s'est traduite par le renforcement du cadre légal et réglementaire avec la promulgation de la loi du 14 décembre 2022 relative à l'évaluation des politiques publiques. Les actions menées concernent aussi bien le renforcement des capacités des acteurs que le développement des méthodes et les appuis à la réalisation des évaluations. Et à ce titre, je voudrais remercier et traduire tous les remerciements de Madame le ministre d'État à la Banque africaine de développement qui a soutenu ce processus depuis l'origine et qui aujourd'hui tend à faire de l'évaluation une politique systématique, une pratique dont on a besoin pour prendre de meilleures décisions. Mesdames et messieurs, l'Afrique ne manque pas de vision, ni de cadre stratégique. Nous disposons de l'agenda 2063. Nous disposons de la ZLECAf. Nous disposons des communautés économiques régionales dynamiques. Nous disposons également d'un potentiel qu'il importe de valoriser. Le véritable défi réside désormais dans la mise en œuvre des plans et des politiques. Notre responsabilité collective consiste à transformer les engagements en résultats, les stratégies en actions et les ambitions en opportunités concrètes pour nos populations. Cela exige davantage de coopération et de coordination, davantage de confiance mutuelle, davantage de cohérence institutionnelle et un engagement politique soutenu. Cela exige également que nous apprenions continuellement de nos expériences et que nous adaptions nos approches à la lumière des enseignements tirés. Cette ambition appelle également une mobilisation accrue des ressources africaines au service des priorités africaines. À cet égard, la vision portée par le président du groupe de la Banque africaine de développement, le docteur Sidi Oulta, à travers la nouvelle architecture financière africaine pour le développement, ouvre des perspectives particulièrement prometteuses. Elle nous invite à penser les modalités de financement du développement afin de mieux accompagner les priorités du continent. Mesdames et messieurs, au cours des prochains jours, vous aurez l'occasion d'examiner les données probantes issues de l'évaluation, les expériences, les réussites, mais aussi les défis rencontrés dans la mise en œuvre des initiatives régionales. Je vous encourage à faire de cette rencontre un espace de dialogue ouvert, d'apprentissage mutuel et de réflexion stratégique, car au fond, notre objectif commun est clair. Faire en sorte que les frontières africaines deviennent davantage des espaces de coopération que de séparation, des vecteurs d'opportunités plutôt que des obstacles, des ponts entre les peuples, nos économies et nos ambitions. Pour conclure, je voudrais réaffirmer l'engagement du gouvernement ivoirien en faveur de la coopération, de l'intégration régionale, du multilatéralisme et de la prise de décisions fondées sur des données probantes. En travaillant ensemble, nous pouvons construire une Afrique plus intégrée, plus résiliente et plus prospère, capable de transformer son potentiel en opportunité pour tous ses citoyens. Je formule le vœu que les travaux de cette semaine de l'évaluation du développement contribuent à faire progresser cette ambition commune. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Yeo there for those remarks representing Minister Nyale Kaba. And of course, you've told us the government of Cote d'Ivoire urging all of us to turn commitments into results, and there must be cooperation, mutual trust, and political will, and of course, recognizing the role of mobilization of African resources, especially as envisioned by the new African Financial Architecture for Development, championed by Dr. Sidi Ota. That is NAFAD in short, the new African Financial Architecture for Development. Also, we've had l'Afrique est invitée à accélérer son intégration régionale. L'intégration régionale est un puissant outil de transformation sociale et économique. Merci beaucoup, Dr. Yeo, for your remarks. So I know, ladies and gentlemen, that our chief guests here are pressed for time. We will not really keep them here for long, but there's so much that's coming. As you can see, we've got one of the best cultural performances, not just in Cote d'Ivoire, across Africa. They are actually remarkable, and they're going to treat us on something really very special, titillating music that you just want for the start of a week like this one to drive away what in English they call the Monday blues. So I would like us to welcome them. And then after that, we'll be showing you a video. They are called Les Compagnons du Sakan. And they'll tell us through the drums what that means. Let's give them a warm welcome, please. Okay, merci. Oh, wow. Listen to that. Listen to that, man. The beauty of African music. And when the balafon, when the kora, and the percussion, the African drum, when they're all blending, you actually hear the message. And sometimes you can even hear your name being called. I was somewhere the weekend, a place called Tumodi, and there was an event there. And apparently, there's a way they drum, and actually somebody will know they're calling them. So I kept seeing people rising, they go, they dance, they touch the drum and give some money. I was told actually the drum has been tuned in such a way that it can call your name. You can know that is Solomon being called, and Solomon will definitely go and do a jig. Unfortunately, I can't do a jig right here. I don't want to steal the show. So let's give them a round of applause, please. Excellent. And we are now going to show you a video, but as they move away from the stage, we'll have the set being prepared for the discussion. So if the colleagues with the chairs, if you can bring them up, and then we get the musical instruments down a little bit for the time being. And then we'll get the video being prepared. Let's get the chairs onto the stage. Supposing we move all a little bit forward, because we're a little bit sparse. Yet there's a good turnout here. If we all moved in together, close to each other, I think it will look very good. If you don't mind, just come closer to each other, especially around the seats here, because again, we are going into a session where we will be doing some interactivity and we want people to be seen clearly. Can we just move in front a little bit, please, if you don't mind? And let me also recognize guests who have come in from as far as South Africa, Tanzania, and other parts of Africa, of course, here locally. Just to say thank you so much for traveling and making here on time. We've got a chief guest who's coming from Ghana as well. I really appreciate this. Colleagues, let's move forward. Come forward, please. If we can just do that quickly. And the chairs, please. The chairs for the discussion, can we have them on stage? So that we can set this properly. Yes, guys at the back, colleagues at the back, please move forward, move forward. Let's fill these chairs in front here and get a really good discussion going. Because I can tell you, the lineup of the panel discussion here is rich, and you want to be frontline actually. Let's get people coming here even in the front line. Yeah, because some of you can come right here so that we can see you clear. Just come right in front here. Yeah, please keep coming, yes. Cut, huh? Okay. So once ready, then let's get the video almost on standby so that we'll get it played as soon as possible. And I'm very grateful, colleagues. You really, you've taken in my advice to move forward. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, if you can come in front, even this front seats, by the way, they're all yours. Just come to the front. They're all yours. Okay. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, are we done? Excellent. So once the setting is complete, we are going to watch a video that gives us a taste of the work the bank is doing in terms of regional integration, taking us to the Central Africa region. You'll be able to see that piece of work shortly once the set is complete. And just to say, if you're on social media, it's #AfDBEvalWeek. Please, let's go on to social media. Already we're having actually comments that already began to come in on our social media and really, very good comments. I might actually get time to read some of them. We have got on LinkedIn, Hassan Sako, who is saying, this initiative, that's the AfDBEvalWeek, is particularly relevant in the current context where African decision makers need rigorous evaluation data to guide increasingly complex and cross-border financing. And we'll be hearing a lot more about that when the panel comes to discuss, and when the Director for Regional Integration, Dr. Joy Kategeko, comes to do the framing. But for now, the video, please.
L'Afrique centrale, un carrefour de richesses naturelles et d'opportunités. Des forêts denses du bassin du Congo aux vastes savanes du Tchad, en passant par les terres fertiles du Cameroun et les plaines de la Centrafrique, chaque pays dévoile un potentiel unique. Une région en transformation à la croisée de l'innovation et du développement durable. C'est pour accompagner cette région que le groupe de la Banque africaine de développement a installé son bureau régional à Yaoundé depuis 2016. Sur le terrain, les projets prennent vie au plus près des communautés. Depuis 1975, la Banque africaine de développement a engagé environ 18,9 milliards de dollars pour soutenir le développement de l'Afrique centrale, avec un portefeuille actuel de 6 milliards de dollars, couvrant environ 125 opérations dans la région. La banque intervient dans des secteurs clés: routes, énergie, agriculture et industrialisation, essentiels à la transformation de la région. Parfois surnommée la banque de l'infrastructure, avec près de la moitié de ses financements consacrés aux routes, à l'énergie et à l'eau, la banque façonne l'avenir du continent. Mais ce n'est pas tout. Dans la région, 1 milliard de dollars sont investis dans l'énergie, moteur du développement. 897 millions de dollars dans l'agriculture et la sécurité alimentaire. Plus de 100 millions de dollars pour accompagner la modernisation des finances publiques des États. Et plus de 400 millions de dollars dans l'éducation et la santé. En outre, la banque accélère ses investissements pour protéger l'environnement et lutter contre les effets du changement climatique. Partout en Afrique centrale, des projets concrets transforment la vie des populations. Au Cameroun, un nouveau pont relie Yagoua à Bongor au Tchad. Long de 620 mètres et prolongé par 14 km de route, il transforme le quotidien des populations des deux rives. Financé à plus de 112 millions de dollars par le groupe de la banque et d'autres partenaires financiers, il rapproche deux nations sœurs et dynamise tout le bassin du lac Tchad. En République démocratique du Congo, imaginez 20 millions de vies changées grâce au projet du barrage sur le site d'Inga. La banque réhabilite les réseaux électriques et les centrales hydroélectriques d'Inga 1 et 2. Elle prépare aussi le développement du Grand Inga, avec Inga 3 et ses 4800 MW de capacité. De la lumière, des opportunités, des perspectives. Au cœur du Tchad, l'eau redonne espoir. Grâce au programme d'approvisionnement en eau potable et d'assainissement en milieu semi-urbain et rural, plus de 500 000 personnes accèdent enfin à une eau propre et à de meilleures conditions d'hygiène, tandis que des milliers de jeunes et de femmes formées créent leurs propres activités.
Au niveau de Païfa, moi-même j'ai reçu une formation en dehors du Tchad au Burkina Faso dans le cadre de la gestion des déchets. Je leur ai formé en gestion des déchets et la fabrication des composts qui a permis à ce que ces femmes-là puissent avoir leur champ, et dans leur champ, ils pratiquent cette formation-là.
Coq, la transformation du bois a changé la donne pour l'économie gabonaise. Depuis 2012, la zone économique spéciale a attiré plus de 50 entreprises et créé 3000 emplois avec l'appui de la Banque africaine de développement, qui a apporté son expertise technique et financière pour les études et la mise en place d'un système de suivi en ligne des opérations du bois. Grâce à 38 millions de dollars investis, le numérique prend son envol en Centrafrique. 900 km de fibres optiques relient désormais le pays à ses voisins. triplant le débit Internet dès la première année. À Bangui, un centre de formation numérique a ouvert ses portes à l'université, offrant aux jeunes un accès à des outils modernes et à des formations innovantes. Plus de connexion, plus d'innovation, plus d'opportunités pour la jeunesse. Une bouffée d'espoir pour le développement et l'emploi.
Un robot humanoïde qu'on a conçu à base de tous les trucs qu'on a récupérés dans les composants électroniques, du carton, des fils à aluminium, tout ce que l'on a utilisé et puis on a jeté. On peut maintenant mettre en ligne, mettre Maman Africa en réseau sur Internet pour que même là où tu es, quel que soit le point de la planète que tu te trouves, tu peux interagir avec Maman Africa. Ce sera grâce à la fibre optique.
Le projet intégré des chaînes de valeur agricole redonne vie dans les campagnes congolaises. Plus de 550 producteurs cultivent désormais des variétés améliorées de maïs, de manioc et soja sur 86 hectares de terres fertiles. À terme, 15 000 hectares seront mobilisés au bénéfice de milliers de femmes et de jeunes, faisant de l'agriculture un véritable moteur de croissance rurale. En Guinée équatoriale, moderniser les finances publiques, c'est moderniser la vie. Grâce à un financement de 29 millions de dollars, les recettes sont mieux collectées, les dépenses mieux gérées et la transparence renforcée. Une économie plus solide, des ressources mieux utilisées pour les citoyens et un avenir plus serein. Derrière chaque projet, un objectif commun. Bâtir une Afrique plus connectée, plus résiliente, créatrice d'emplois et tournée vers l'avenir. La Banque africaine de développement s'engage à accompagner cette transformation pour une Afrique intégrée, souveraine et pleinement actrice de son destin.
Thank you. Thank you for accompanying us on that too. And you saw Mama Africa, that robot there, is worth watching. We are really getting somewhere. So ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is going to lay the framework of our discussion. And this is the Director for Regional Integration Coordination Department here at the bank, Dr. Joy Kategekwa. Let me say a few words about Dr. Kategekwa. She is a respected leader in international trade, investment, and regional integration and development, and has spent the past 23 years driving socioeconomic transformation on our continent. And previously, Dr. Kategeko worked with the United Nations Development Programs, regional strategy. She was a regional strategy advisor on Africa, based in New York, and she led the Africa Continental Free Trade Area portfolio. And as the founding head of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, Regional Office for Africa, based in Addis Ababa, she steered advisory teams that designed the AfCTA, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So this is a matter that is really close to our heart. Actually, it's deep in our heart, dans le corps. And earlier, the World Trade Organization in Geneva, she led institutional support to Africa, leading those negotiations and capacity development and knowledge there. So let us welcome Dr. Joy Kategekwa, please. And Joy, when you finish, please don't leave the stage. Do take one of the chairs because we're going into a discussion when you finish. Thank you.
Solomon, thank you very much. What a lovely introduction. Esteemed participants, thank you for honoring our invitation to come and spend some time with us over the next 3 days, trying to cook some really powerful development ideas on how we accelerate impact in Africa through the investments that we make. So we're talking about accelerating impact across borders. And I think in that, precisely in that, is already a placement of regional integration. So I'd like to start by asking, or trying to answer the question, why regional integration? But if I'm asked to frame how the African Development Bank looks at regional integration, what I'd like for you to retain at the end of this is this idea that success requires understanding the foundational enablers, investing in the foundational enablers, The second piece is understanding, well, if we have the enablers, what can catalyze the pace? So the accelerators. The third piece is, how do we get people in their hearts and minds to think about regional integration as something of a pathway to prosperity? It's not something far up at the African Union. It's something for you and me. And then finally, how does the bank do that in terms of how we organize ourselves? So why regional integration? I was thinking about this question yesterday and trying to think about a simple way to break it down. Think about this continent of Africa with its multiple countries. 16 of them landlocked, maybe 3 or 4 with populations above 100 million. Countries that are so powerful in potential, but that potential only really goes to a logical continuum when it is looked at as a collective. And so the power of regional integration, you could think about it, how do countries create the wealth, the engines that drive economies? They do this through creating a resource base, either through trade, through investment, through industry. You ask yourself, which of the African countries can stand on its own and powerfully carry that through? You might not find one. And so regional integration is essentially Africa's pathway to prosperity. It's not just going back and saying, my brother, my sister, we're connected at the hip, and so we like each other, and so we integrate. It's not about going back to 1963 and thinking about the African Union, the Organization of African Unity. It's not just about 2015, where we said, well, let's have Agenda 2063. It's about situating Africa in the current global dynamic, where recent shocks have made it very clear to us that you cannot have resilience, you cannot truly sustain economies with people at the heart when you don't have medical sovereignty, when you don't have the vaccines, when you are sort of thrown out of base based on the shocks that are happening. So if COVID told us about medical security, the war in Ukraine has told us about this idea that you need food security. And now with the continual dynamics and shocks, we know that it's food, it's fuel, it's fertilizer. So Africa's resilience, the African within the world right now, requires regional integration as an essential ethos, as an essential investment. That's the first point. The second point then is, well, what is this thing called regional integration? Many things. But at the bank, we look at 5 critical pillars. The first one would be this question around infrastructure, the infrastructure of integration. And the video we saw showed that very well. The second thing we think about at the bank is trade as a catalyst of integration. So boosting intra-African trade, the African Continental Free Trade Area. The third piece is people and mobility. The idea that we can't talk about regional integration and Africa as a place of promise for all Africans when Africans are shut out of Africa through visa policy. That's the third piece. The fourth one is financial integration. What's the cost of money? What is the cost of trade? With my shilling from Uganda, how do I engage with Senegal? The answer is in financial integration. And so we look at that and measure it seriously. And then productive integration. This question around building the capacity to produce higher value added products. So those 5 park in your mind. And then I go to the essential question then of, well, how does the bank invest in this? And here I'd answer 3 main points. The foundational enablers. Think about it as a bedrock. Christians talk about a cornerstone. When you're talking about integration, you think of it as acquis. À la base, it's really the foundation. What does Africa need to integrate? It's the infrastructure of integration. It's the roads, it's the rail, it's the water transport, it's the air transport, it's the ICT cables that we cannot logically think about going in that direction of integration if we do not invest strongly in that. And VP Hassatu gave us some really good numbers, so I will not repeat them. But suffice to say that the African Development Bank Group, if it has a reputation, it's as the infrastructure bank. Some might think, well, when you look at the last investments from 2018 to 2025, about 71% of the financing of regional operations went to transport, for example. Some think that's a problem. I don't. If the infrastructure gap in Africa is $190 billion and growing, then surely you have to lay the foundational enablers. Now, the question is, where do you go next if you're building this huge infrastructure? That means we move in the direction of this integrated approach, that you're not just laying the backbone, you're not just laying the fiber, you're thinking about how to draw people in. And so now we have what we call the integrated economic development corridors as a vision, as a design vision, that you're not looking at Lobito, the rail only, to pull the rare earths out of DRC or Zambia, for that matter, get to the port of Lobito and find other parts of the world in which value could be added. You're looking at a design architecture in which right within that rail, you're thinking about industry, you're thinking about logistics, you're thinking about power, you're thinking about one-stop border posts that are digitized, you're thinking about a way to crowd in people. So in its simplicity, that's the logic of the foundational enablers. And you can take that to air, you can take that to any amount of infrastructure. The second piece then is the accelerators. And that's where you talk about, if you had these foundation enablers, how do you ensure that they're not white elephants? You think about trade, you think about industry. Traditionally, when you think about how integration can move fastest, the answer is in those areas that draw in people. But we know that Africa's place in the world, it's there, it's a place when you think about production. But currently it's at the bottom, that Africa gives the raw materials, the Lobito analogy I spoke about. And so the idea with the accelerators is to identify how you break that cycle and think immediately about how to valorize the opportunity in the African Continental Free Trade Area. And those are two things you do. The first one is we finance these regional economic communities, the continental institutions that are at the heart of the harmonization agenda, that are at the heart of making sure standards are similar, that are at the heart of tackling non-tariff barriers. But we also work with institutions that support countries to position and locate themselves in the opportunity of the AfCFTA. That takes me to industrialization as a point, that Africa will not prosper if you do not identify a part of value chains for which you're at the core of producing. And so industrialization is at the heart of how we see regional integration. We just produced a wonderful magazine, the Integrate Africa magazine, because what it does is try to help us understand how we do made in Africa, trade in Africa, that industrialization is really and truly the pathway to progress. And so if you think about the foundation enablers and the accelerators, well then, how do you bring people into this? How do you fit in that? This is one of the least invested in aspects of integration. I truly believe that the quest for Africa's integration will not be won in the asphalt we're laying only. It has to be won in how much of your heart connects with the purpose of integration. And therefore, people are a critical part of it. This is why we produce the Africa Visa Openness Index that captures what is the condition of the African in terms of traveling across the continent. Did you know that only 28.2% of African travel for Africans within Africa is visa-free? That is a challenge that you can pick up through your advocacy. That's why the work that Gabby does at the Africa Prosperity Network is so crucial, that we must make Africa borderless now. So that's the people piece. The product piece is we have to identify products that help us to tell the story simply. Regional integration can be a tough conversation to chew, because we often think about it as these very high complex issues that are floating up there at the African Union. No. These issues are for you and these issues are for me. So how do we communicate around it? The Integrate Africa magazine. And then finally, the platforms. We have to find spaces where we sit with all of the stakeholders that have something to drive on regional integration. It's not just us at the African Development Bank Group. It is civil society. It is business. It is multi-stakeholder. This is why at the annual meetings, we just launched what we call the Integrate Africa Forum, a place where we can come every year and collectively assess progress. So let me close off by asking this question, well then, how do you come in? How does it sit with you? How is it that you can be the architect and the driver of regional integration in Africa? And this is where I go to this idea of the consciousness of purpose, that when you think about it as an African, which part can you lift? Can you be the one to advocate for a visa-free Africa? Can you be the one to lobby how national budgets are actually sort of ascribed to ensure that regional infrastructure is a priority? Can you be the one to start those great businesses that are about made in Africa? Will you be the one to make in Africa? And finally, will you be the African that buys African products? Think about that. When you put it down to its simplest sense, we are the architects. We are the owners of this journey. We are the drivers of this thing. And so as you locate yourself, as you choose to champion it, we meet you at the point of partnership. Thank you very much.
That was an impassioned plea, Dr. Joy Kategekwa. Thank you so much. Maybe take the middle chair. Yes, that's very good. And once again, having listened to her very keenly, she spoke about the role of regional integration and the African Free Continental Trade Area, AfCTA. You really felt that there is something that all of us are called upon to do to make it a reality. So we are now moving on to the discussion, the panel discussion. Let me invite on stage. And as they come up, ladies and gentlemen, let me first of all ask you to give Dr. Kategeko another round of applause, please. That was really remarkable. Thank you so much for that. Yes, she's going to be joined on stage by Mr. Gabi Asare Ochere Dako, the executive chairman and founder of the Africa Prosperity Network. If you can come closer to me here, sir, I'll appreciate. And just to give you a little bit of detail there, the Africa Prosperity Network is a Pan-African organization established in 2022 to mobilize Africa's private sector behind the continent's economic integration agenda under the AfCTA. He's also the convener of the hashtag Make Africa Borderless Now movement. It was launched in Accra just this February 2026, and is petitioning the African Union to fully implement existing treaties on economic integration and free movement across the continent, a point that Dr. Kategeko was saying about movement of goods and services and people across the continent. He's a trained lawyer, trained in the United Kingdom and Ghana, and is a senior partner of Africa Legal Associates and chair of the Ghana Hub of the Commonwealth Enterprise Investment Council. Let's give him a round of applause once again to say thank you. And let me call on the stage Dr. Joseph Marshall Ribeiro, Deputy Director General for West Africa here at the African Development Bank Group. He's based here in Abidjan. He previously served as the bank's country manager for Angola, Mozambique, and Sao Tome and Principe. So he's very fluent in Portuguese. Before joining the bank, he taught at École Polytechnique de Montréal and worked as a research and consulting engineer, and is a published author on a project management, hydrology, and economic development. I don't know how you combine those two or those three things, but let me join them now for the discussion. Thank you. Okay, yeah, thank you. So if you flip the button towards the, if you flip it up, it will come on, absolutely. It will take us, please, split second to come on. So I just wanted to maintain momentum from where you left, Dr. Kategeko, as you were laying the framework and listening to you carefully. And you were saying how regional integration is central to Africa's development vision. Of course, the African Union's Agenda 2023, that is for the Africa we want, and the AfCTA, and also touching on the bank's 10-year strategy. Yet the real test is whether integration delivers tangible impact for countries, businesses, and people. And just listening to you speak so passionately about this, and from the bank's perspective, Dr. Kategeko, what does the evidence tell us about where Africa's regional integration is at the moment? Is it gaining traction? Is it still falling short? Where is it?
Okay, so thank you very much, Solomon. You know, we produced together with the African Union and UNECA 2 reports. One is the Africa Regional Integration Index. The second one is the Assessing Regional Integration in Africa report. I highly recommend that you look at those, because in the first chapter of each of those, you will see almost a metric style evidence base of what's changing on the landscape of regional integration. Let's just look at some metrics. In terms of intra-African trade, the volume is huge. I mean, we're talking about above maybe 250 billion in 2024. But if you look at the percentage as well, we're now talking about 17%. That's an important point, because when you break it down, what you start to see is the dream we have for value addition. 46% of intra-African trade is in value added. What does that tell you? That Africa can industrialize. Africa is industrializing. So with the African Continental Free Trade Area, we have an opportunity to take that to scale if we invest strongly on implementation, but also on industry. But then let's talk about other parameters. I'll just go back to the AfCFTA because I'm always talking about it. Certificates of origin that have been issued by African countries on the basis of the African Continental Free Trade Area, the numbers are now 10,000 of them. And so that's important because it tells you African enterprise is using this instrument. There are other metrics that are not going as far as we would want, and I talked about it on the people mobility. So the evidence base tells us that we have to lean off the bank's strength, which is infrastructure, and ensure that we design it in a manner that's trade enabling, industry enabling, which is a bit of the point that I was trying to make over there.
So there is progress.
There is indeed progress.
Yeah.
Success depends on how we move from here. Integrated approaches, ensuring that we look specifically to industry and understand what kind of financing supports industry. It might not be your typical trade finance because of the absence of patience in that model. So can we think about production enhancing, export facilitating financing? What does that look like?
And the word acceleration that you touched on, then how do we accelerate?
So I would say identify the accelerators, your choice of accelerators. In my mind, it's trade and industry because that way you draw in the people. And then channel your financing structure to move in that direction in a manner that speaks to the reality of the market and the players. We met a group of African women. We convened them last year. The women leading exporting enterprises under the AfCFTA. So it's not just the thinking of it would be nice to use this instrument. It's those with consignments that are going, part of the certificates of origin I was talking about. And what they said is the bank must respond through a financing means that touches where we are. You need patient capital. So think about it. We have patient financing for infrastructure. The bank has the regional operations envelope. 25% of the ADF funding for low-income countries goes to regional operations, cross-border infrastructure. Where is the patient capital for production?
And when you spoke about, trade, I was reading actually the Integrated Africa magazine, and there is a report there by Mr. Clever Gatete of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, where he says trade is the path to prosperity. And I would definitely say read that magazine. It's got some really good reports in there. And let me just remind you, I'll be bringing the microphone to you. So I'm not going to hog this. I'm going to monopolize the discussion. Be ready. The microphone's coming to you. Let me bring in here Gabi Asare, Ochere Dak, Executive Chairman and Founder of the African Prosperity Network. We are talking about, private capital being consistently positioned as the answer to Africa's financing gap. You're talking about more than $400 billion per annum that's required for Africa's economic transformation. But from your experience, what does the development system often understand or misunderstand about why private capital does not flow into regional priorities at the levels that are expected?
Thank you. I think private capital will go where it is wanted. I think that's the first thing. Secondly, also, I think when we look at private capital, I think we should have a broader concept of it on the continent. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. For instance, I think about a year ago, when we had the Africa Prosperity Dialogue, the conversation was how we can fund the infrastructure that can connect and integrate our continent. And the former AU Commission chairperson, who was responsible for the Agenda 2063, said something interesting at that conference. He said, why can't we create a $1 a day fund where Africans everywhere can see a project which is bankable, which is linked to the integration project, and it could be maybe a railway link from east to west, let's say from Dakar to Djibouti, that's about 10,000 kilometers. And when you look at the numbers, I'm giving you an example. When you look at the numbers, it could be anything between 120 billion to $300 billion. So you ask yourself, we need this infrastructure in order to move people and goods from East to West Africa. But where is the money going to come from? And that's where I think the focus of the AfDB is very important, where they are looking to see how we can aggregate the various funds that are on the continent, whether it's pension funds, whether it's sovereign wealth, whether whatever it is.
Equity funds,
insurance and all that.
All that. That's the new African financial architecture.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Now, so you have a situation where you identify a project. It could be, like I said, the East-West Railway. It could be even the Grand Inga Dam, which we've been tinkering around it for all these years. It could be a road network. It could be a fiber optic infrastructure. It could be water. It could be a logistic hub, whatever. But then you identify the project and make sure it is bankable, because private money will go where it can get returns. You make sure it is bankable, then you have maybe the Africa Development Bank, maybe other development finance institutions, okay? And these pension funds, providing the seed capital. So for instance, yes, it's 300 billion, it's a lot of money, or 250 billion. But then if you can have maybe 30 to 40% of that, okay, being done by these AfDBs, the AfriExims, the AFCs, development financial institutions, and pension funds, then we can reach out to the African people. And I say so because even according to AfDB, report that you did way back in 2011 or thereabouts, you identified over 300 million middle class on our continent. Let's assume that they haven't moved much, okay? They haven't increased much. So let's say maybe they're about 350 to 400 million of our 1.5 billion population. That's the middle class. Then you are looking at anything between 200 to about 400 million, what they call global Africans. And it could be first, second, third generation Africans. They are connected. And even those of us whose children were born, even in Europe, they are more connected now than perhaps would have been the case some time back. And then you look at what happened just last week when South Africa played Mexico. It was interesting to see several African countries, celebrities, all supporting Mexico. Now, why was that the case? Because they felt that South Africa was going the opposite direction to where Africa should go, which is free movement.
And if I may just come in here, because I don't want to lose sight of it. There's a very important point you've said.
Yes.
And this is what you called a $1 a day fund. Okay,
Yes,
a $1 a
yes,
day
yes,
fund.
yes.
And then you've also spoken about private money.
Yes.
Private money requires a return. Yeah. So this dollar-a-day fund, what are you promising the public to get? Are they buying bonds? Are they buying shares? Or is it one of those charitable initiatives to buy, to send them to go to invest?
I'm getting to the point.
Yes.
But I was trying to say that there's a consciousness that we are not tapping into. That's why I refer to South Africa.
Yes.
Now, when you see the way the African people reacted to that, okay? For me, they were telling us that, look, we want to see how we can work closer together.
Correct.
We want to see how we can get free movement of people, goods, services, capital, and cultures going on our continent.
Correct.
So when you have this ecosystem, what then do you do? Then we go to the $1 a day fund. So for instance, you identify this project, it will cost about 300 billion. There are seed capital, or if you like, risk mitigation sort of instruments being put together by these AfDB and the rest of them. So you have this. And then you find a way whether to raise bonds, or we know what happened with the GED, the Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia. They managed to mobilize funds from Ethiopians in Ethiopia and Ethiopians outside of Ethiopia. Now I'm saying that, can we scale this to a regional or continental level? Where we identify a project, this is what will bring us together, this is what will connect us, and it is bankable. And the AfDBs and all of them are putting maybe 30%, 40% of what is required. And then you create this fund, and you then invite Africans to put money in there. And we know that within 10 years, if we can find, and look, even if you have 1 million Africans spending $10,000 or investing $10,000, 1 million out of our population of 1.5 billion, plus the 300, 400 million who are outside of the continent, investing $10,000, that gives you what?
Let's do some quick calculations here.
That
1 million,
10 billion.
1 million times
10 billion here.
That's
And when you have 10 billion,
Yes, yeah.
you can leverage it 3 times. Okay? So
Yes.
out of just 1 million people putting $10,000, and from your salary, I know you can easily do that.
Oh, please, don't give.
Okay, so, and when they see it, so my point is there's an emotional and there's also an investment aspect of it. So me, it's not about donation. It's about being a shareholder in the Africa that we want to create, in the infrastructure and building the infrastructure that will connect and integrate us.
Yes.
I think that's the point.
And I think just latching on to the point you've made, if we were to replicate the Grand Renaissance Dam, that kind of approach where you've got the public involved, then the scale is what actually the bank is talking about, doing things at scale, even comes to unlocking Africa's capital, which is the cardinal point number 1, is about unlocking them at scale. And Joseph Ribeiro, because you're the Deputy Director General for the bank in West Africa, you've also served in various countries. And we know the bank, as we've been hearing from Dr. Kategeko and now from Gabi here, finances regional integration projects, been doing this for ages. We now have got those corridors, power pools, trade facilitation, cross-border infrastructure. So when you assess these things from your experience, what do they tell us about where the bank's muscle really is, where it's really, where you can see the results telling this is exactly what we mean by investing in solid infrastructure?
Merci, Solomon. D'abord, je voudrais remercier Karen et le département IDEV pour l'invitation et saluer également la participation des autorités ivoiriennes à travers mon ami Yeo qui était là, et aussi souhaiter bon vent à toutes nos équipes africaines en Coupe du Monde. Pour répondre à ta question, je crois que la banque a prouvé qu'elle a une grande capacité de mobilisation. Par exemple, vous avez cité le domaine de l'énergie. Aujourd'hui, vous allez en Guinée, vous allez en Sierra Leone, vous allez au Libéria, on consomme de l'énergie venant de Côte d'Ivoire. Grâce à quoi? Grâce à la ligne CLSG qui a été financée par la Banque africaine de développement. Vous allez en Gambie, 70% de l'énergie vient de l'OMVG, l'Organisation de mise en valeur du fleuve Gambie, Et la Gambie reçoit son énergie de la Sénélec du Sénégal et de EDG de Guinée grâce aux lignes financées par la BAD. Donc, c'est une réalité que la banque met en œuvre concrètement sa capacité de mobilisation et c'est ce que nous avons fait. Nous avons un très bon crédit au niveau des pays. Nous sommes vus comme une institution à la fois humble et qui réalise des choses sur le terrain. Un exemple, encore citant la Gambie, c'est le pont de la Sénégambie. Moi, je suis de la région, donc avant, quand vous veniez au pont de la Sénégambie pour traverser, aller de l'autre côté du fleuve, vous pouviez rester plusieurs jours en attente, surtout les camions, en attente pour pouvoir passer parce que c'était un bac. Aujourd'hui, c'est en 10 minutes et 3 000 francs CFA de péage, rien du tout. Donc, la banque a pu financer en ayant un bon dialogue entre le Sénégal et la Gambie notamment pour réaliser ce pont-là et avec des dons d'ailleurs. Donc, c'est l'occasion de saluer nos collègues de l'intégration régionale, Joy, parce que ça a été financé entièrement par des dons, 100 millions. Donc, ça, c'est le point fort de la banque. On a parlé également, je pense que Asatoko, elle était là, à parler des infrastructures régionales stratégiques. Aujourd'hui, on parle du corridor Abidjan-Lagos, qui va être un corridor intelligent à 3 voies, donc qui va transformer réellement la mobilité des biens et des personnes le long de la côte ouest africaine. On parle du corridor multimodal Praia-Dakar-Abidjan. Ça aussi, ça l'étampe de la BAD. Donc, nous sommes en mesure de travailler avec tout le monde et nous sommes perçus par nos gouvernements comme des agents de confiance. C'est ça la force de la BAD. Et je voudrais faire un petit encart pour parler du rôle de la Côte d'Ivoire, parce que nous sommes en Côte d'Ivoire, c'est le pays membre. Il faut reconnaître que la Côte d'Ivoire est probablement le pays le plus intégrateur en Afrique de l'Ouest. Aujourd'hui, beaucoup de communautés, nos frères nigériens, burkinabés, envoient beaucoup d'argent à leur pays. Les remittances, les fonds de la diaspora viennent de la Côte d'Ivoire. Quand on investit en énergie en Côte d'Ivoire, on sait qu'on énergie en énergie dans tous nos pays. Mali, Burkina, ils reçoivent l'énergie de Côte d'Ivoire. Donc, c'est l'occasion de saluer vraiment la vision des autorités ivoiriennes, et notamment, pas seulement en matière d'infrastructure, mais aussi en finance. Aujourd'hui, malheureusement, le Sénégal est en proie à une situation de dette un peu difficile, mais il faut savoir que 42% de la dette en CFA du Sénégal est détenue par les banques ivoiriennes. 42%, c'est beaucoup. Donc ça, c'est souvent, on croit que l'aide, entre guillemets, ou la coopération vient d'ailleurs, mais non, ça se passe ici. Donc, voilà, et 70% des entreprises cotées à la bourse régionale sont ivoiriennes, etc. Donc, un grand bravo à la République Côte d'Ivoire. Maintenant, c'est vrai qu'on dit qu'il y a beaucoup de choses qui ont marché, mais il y a beaucoup de choses qui ont du mal à marcher. Pourquoi? Parce qu'on a eu malheureusement une fragmentation de l'architecture institutionnelle. Aujourd'hui, vous avez les alliances de l'État du Sahel qui sont sorties de la CEDEAO. Au niveau des peuples, ça n'a pas autant d'impact, mais quand même, c'est un signal, c'est quelque chose de perturbateur. Nous avons aussi le problème de productivité. Joy a parlé tout à l'heure de l'industrialisation. Je pense aussi que le vrai moteur de l'intégration, c'est l'industrialisation. Parce que si on n'a pas des biens à valeur ajoutée à échanger, bon, ça ne va pas. Aujourd'hui, en Afrique, surtout en Afrique de l'Ouest, la mobilité est acquise. Il y a l'exemption de visa avec la carte d'identité d'un pays, vous allez partout. Mais s'il n'y a pas d'industrialisation et de valeur ajoutée aux biens, on ne fera pas d'intégration parce qu'il n'y aura pas réellement d'échange. Ce qui marche, ce qu'il faut faire mieux marcher, c'est la sécurité. Nous sommes en proie à beaucoup de problèmes de sécurité dans les pays du Sahel et maintenant on parle même de Sahel plus parce que malheureusement nos pays du Golfe de Guinée dans le nord sont confrontés aux problèmes aux défis de sécurité. Et nous avons également des questions macroéconomiques sur l'harmonisation de la macroéconomie entre l'UEMOA et l'autre zone des monnaies non CFA. Donc, pour dire qu'il y a des paramètres macro qui échappent au contrôle de la banque par rapport auxquels nous devons naviguer. Mais cela étant, la banque a prouvé qu'elle peut et continue de faire beaucoup de choses. Et le défi qui, à mon avis, reste, c'est vraiment, c'est le troisième point cardinal que Dr Ta, notre président, a articulé. Comment transformer en dividende toute cette jeunesse que nous avons. Et c'est un défi qui se pose à la banque également. Merci.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Ribeiro there. I really want to come to you because we are almost moving into the last stage of getting some quick quips from our guests here, but I want you to also feel your voice has been heard. I've got one or two comments I'm going to take from social media, but is the microphone ready here? Let's see some hands go up, please, for some questions or clarifications. Yes, there's one. If you can introduce yourself, the microphone, please. We've got a gentleman here, actually 1, 2, 3, 4. My goodness, now we're going to overrun or something. Microphone, please. Okay. I think let's start with the gentleman here because he was the first to raise up his hand. He's here in purple. Very nice. So you start from there, then we'll take the 3 questions. Okay.
Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais saluer tous nos éminents panélistes. Je suis Isaac Dapré. Je suis doctorant en gestion de projet, solidarité internationale, programme. Au niveau de la chaire UNESCO, l'Université de Côte d'Ivoire, je suis en instant de soutenance de ma thèse. Et la question qui m'a beaucoup trottiné au niveau de ma thèse, c'est, on va dire, l'appropriation. L'appropriation des projets. On parle bien d'intégration et je voudrais remercier les panélistes qui ont vraiment bien abordé les questions d'intégration. Mais l'intégration ne peut pas se faire sans la population. Pour la petite étude, j'ai fait sur un projet que je ne nommerai pas ici, qui a été financé par la Banque mondiale, mais aussi par un autre fonds. Et il est arrivé qu'il y a près de 31%, 31 à 35%, où les populations ne se retrouvent pas dans les projets. Et donc, je voudrais que cette thématique que nous sommes en train d'écouter au travers de nos panélistes, que pendant que nous parlions d'intégration, que les projets et les programmes mis en place tiennent compte de l'architecture, de chaque culture, de chaque réalité, puisque l'Afrique a une complexité de culture et cela donc impacte durablement la mise en œuvre des projets. Même en Côte d'Ivoire, seulement dans un seul pays, les réalités culturelles, on peut dire que c'est la même, mais du plan de vue sociologique, il y a des différences. Donc, je voudrais que nous puissions plus me donner d'éclairage là-dessus. Et je voudrais rebondir également sur ce qui a été dit par M. Gabi. Voilà. Merci beaucoup pour votre intervention.
If you can make it short, please, because of time.
OK,
Yeah,
d'accord.
yeah.
La dernière question, c'est $1 par jour et il a parlé d'1 million de personnes qui pourraient donner pour que l'Afrique puisse mobiliser des fonds. Je pense que c'est une très bonne idée, mais la mise en œuvre également, il faudra y réfléchir et trouver le bon cadre. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. 2 questions there. Yes. Well, let's go to, yeah, let's take the gentleman, the 2 gentlemen there, and then we'll come here. Thanks. At the back. Yeah, go, yeah, continue. Yeah.
Bonjour à tous, je suis Brice Beaumané, entrepreneur dans l'industrie des matières premières, donc je fais du négoce. Ma question s'adresse au Dr Joy, c'est concernant l'industrialisation aujourd'hui on va dire, des matières premières au niveau de l'Afrique. Moi, j'ai une question qui est vraiment très pratique. Aujourd'hui, on a des entreprises exportatrices dans plusieurs secteurs, que ce soit dans le bois, que ce soit dans le cacao, que ce soit dans la noix de cajou, qui transforment localement. Donc, au niveau de l'industrialisation, c'est une réalité ici en Côte d'Ivoire. Mais la difficulté réside on va dire, dans la captation des marchés sur la captation on va dire, des clients sur des marchés internationaux. comment aujourd'hui, parce que on entend plusieurs fois industrialisation, mais quand on industrialise, on n'industrialise pas pour garder. C'est-à-dire que même si vous avez le bois, quand vous transformez le bois de teck, quand vous transformez le cacao en poudre ou bien en beurre de cacao, vous ne le gardez pas. C'est parce que vous avez une commande et que vous pouvez exécuter cette commande-là que vous produisez. Donc aujourd'hui, concrètement, il y a des entreprises qui exportent, on va dire, des produits transformés. Mais comment, avec des institutions comme la BAD, on arrive à créer des mises en relation pour capter des marchés à l'international? Parce que le problème n'est pas d'industrialiser, parce que j'entends toujours industrialisation, industrialisation. Si vous prenez la Côte d'Ivoire, pratiquement aujourd'hui, on transforme 46% de notre cacao. Si vous prenez la noix de cajou, aujourd'hui, on est dans une dynamique d'industrialisation. Mais la problématique pour toutes les entreprises, aujourd'hui, vous avez des entreprises qui n'ont qu'un seul client. C'est-à-dire que vous avez des entreprises qui exportent, qui transforment localement, mais qui n'ont qu'un seul client. Et je ne pense pas que ce soit la demande qui manque, mais comment on arrive à créer des synergies de mise en relation sérieuse avec la demande sur le marché international.
Okay.
Voici vraiment ma question au Dr. Joy. Et puis, on souhaiterait vraiment avoir des réponses qui sont concrètes, loin de beaucoup de politique. Merci.
Okay. Gentleman at the back.
Ok, bonjour à tous. Merci beaucoup pour la présentation des panélistes. Moi, c'est le Dr. Atse Kambo, docteur en gouvernance et intégration régionale de l'Université panafricaine au Cameroun. Je suis aussi le coordonnateur général du Panafricain FINDO, réseau africain des jeunes chercheurs. Merci beaucoup aux interventions. Il y a 3 questions. La première question, c'est comment on peut parler de données probantes si on n'arrive pas à avoir les données sur les recensements peut-être nationaux. Je prends l'exemple de montrer l'Afrique centrale, le Tchad. Le recensement, le 3e recensement, c'est maintenant ça se fait. Le dernier recensement date de 2009. Vous voyez, 16 ans après. Comment on va avoir des données sur les populations pour faire des données probantes? Deuxième cas, le Cameroun. Le recensement a commencé en 2026. Le dernier recensement date de 2005. Près de 21 ans après. Donc, parler de données probantes, c'est bien beau, mais si on ne finance pas les recensements des populations pour savoir quelles sont les données que nous avons de nos populations, c'est un peu difficile. Donc, qu'est-ce que la BAD fait en ce sens pour aider les pays à, peut-être chaque 5 ans, par exemple, chaque pays a pris l'engagement chaque 5 ans de financer le recensement pour avoir des données agrégées, désagrégées sur la population? La deuxième question, c'est par rapport à l'Union africaine. L'Union africaine, il y a le plan décennal qui est mis en œuvre normalement en 2024-2033. Il y a 15 projets. Est-ce que la BAD s'approprie ces 15 projets de l'Union africaine? C'est vrai, j'ai vu IGA, barrage 3 de RDC, mais au-delà de IGA, il y a 14 autres projets. Est-ce que la BAD s'approprie les 14 projets pour les financer? Puisqu'on sait que l'autre année, il a élaboré un plan de financement de 8 000 milliards de dollars, je pense, pour ces 10 années, pour ces 15 projets. Est-ce que la BAD est au courant de ces 15 projets? Comment elle a financé l'Union africaine? La dernière question, c'est par rapport au document de stratégie d'intégration régionale de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Il y a eu le premier plan, 2011-2017, le deuxième, 18-25. Est-ce qu'il y a eu des évaluations? Parce que je vois sur le document ici, version révisée. L'autre a été adopté en 2018. En 2019, il y a eu une version révisée. Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? Est-ce qu'il y a eu des évaluations? Merci beaucoup pour votre compréhension.
Okay, we'll take from the lady here, then we can answer those questions. Issy, yeah. Bring it to the lady here. Yes, and then if we have time, we'll get to the lady here, please, if you can get the microphone, and then the panel will answer that. Dr. Ribeiro, I hope you had that on West Africa Development Plan. There are some directed to you, Joy, and of course to Gabi here. But let's get this one, at least we get a lady asking questions. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Solomon. I am Khadija Alawi. I'm a PhD researcher at Mohammed VI Polytechnic University in Morocco and invited researcher at the Centre de Recherche Politique d'Abidjan. And I work on political risk for energy projects and investments. And my question is to Dr. Joy and Dr. Joseph. Dr. Joy, you mentioned one of the pillars of the regional integration here at the perception of the bank is people and peace. And also in your presentation, Dr. Joseph, you mentioned that one of the things that we should work on is security in what you call the Sahel Plus, or where, if my understanding is well, Le Grand Sahel. So my question is, how does the bank operationalize political risk analysis and political risk evaluation in its engagement in the energy sector in Africa, but specifically in the region of West Africa? Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, so Dr. Joe, you're going to kick off and then come to Gabby and then, yes.
Well, thank you very much for these questions, very reflective, and bringing back the purpose of a week like this, that it's truly about introspection and thinking about how we can do better. So with respect to the regional integration strategy for West Africa, I think I'll leave that to our colleague, the Deputy Director General, because he's perfectly in charge of that. The only thing I'd say is that the extension of this strategy is a reflection of agility and adaptability, that the pillars remain relevant, yet adjusted to the reality of the fragility in the region, and that these strategies are not prepared sitting in the bank and thinking about what works for the region, but through really a lot of consultation with the member states, with the regional economic communities, with civil society. But I'll leave my colleague to give us further and better particulars. On the risk issue, I'd talk about the role of fragility assessments in each of the investments, each of the strategies that we do. We have a transition states coordination office whose role is to ensure that everything the bank does has a fragility lens, that you control for fragility, and that you're investing to shock-proof Africa's development. So here we are now on the cusp of turning to a new strategic framework on regional integration and deep consultations, assessments, analysis, precisely on what it means to deliver development now in a region, parts of which are growing in fragility. So we work very closely with those colleagues. On the human resource issue, I think this is one of those that is such a great opportunity, because much of what's happening on the cusp of where Africa can go faster through regional integration is precisely the point you made, DDG, this question around industrialization. But when you think about human capital and you think about where we invest, most of our systems prepare you to be good lawyers, good economists. So how do you engage in the wood industry, for example? Where are the skills for that? Is the answer in TVET? What about digital? So people for the African economy right now, for me, is a big deal. And closing the gap between what we learn and the possibility to earn. And so we have an SME strategy, and I think we need to think a lot more about the connection between the two. We're in the middle of trying to develop an action plan for implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, and the lens is really around utilization and operationalization. So a big piece of that we're thinking about is exactly what kind of investments need to be put in there. Our 4 cardinal points under the leadership of President Ulta hit on that point specifically, that we must leverage and harness dividends from our demographics. It's not straightforward. It requires an investment in human capital. But that also has to be sector-oriented. When you think about the African landscape and the opportunities, well, if we're talking about opportunities in automobiles, making automobiles in Africa, if we're talking about lithium-ion batteries, right? If we're talking about mobile financial services, how are we preparing the human capital for that? So I think there's a lot of learning that we have to do and a lot of reflection that allows us to invest in the sorts of capacities that do that. We had the Jobs for Youth program, I believe, and many of those, but I think the time is right to think again about how we go faster there. The other thing we're thinking about is how do we create a pipeline for industrialization projects in Africa? We have the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, PIDA, the AU North Star that we follow for infrastructure but what is the North Star for industrialization? So we're thinking through what that looks like, and we're calling it the Program for Accelerating Industrial Development in Africa. The goal is to create a pipeline of projects that the bank can then consider working with countries and private sector.
But the question there, Dr. Kategeko, was industrialization needs markets, access to markets.
This is where I'm going. This is the final question. I was trying to tackle all of them at the same time. Industrialization needs access to markets. Access to markets requires an end-to-end programmatic intervention that understands where you are in terms of positioning for the market, the specific bottlenecks you must climb, overcome in entering the market, how you stay and expand. So let me explain briefly. If you think about production in clothing and textiles, or in cocoa, as you said, you're thinking about the production side in terms of the patient financing that I spoke about at the beginning. You're thinking about the ability to produce products that are of standards that meet the sanitary conditions. You're thinking about products that have the right traceability in terms of meeting technical barriers on labeling. You're thinking about the ability to get export licensing. You're thinking about the ability to hit the border and be facilitated. You're thinking about entering the next market and benefiting from the preferential tariff treatment. You're thinking about the ability for that treatment in that country to allow you not to be discriminated against outside of a tariff by new norms being brought up. The point is that it's an end-to-end approach. And there's no simple way to answer that than having serious targeted programs that are at the level of value chains. It also needs different partners, Solomon, because it's not the sort of thing that you solve only through the policy with governments. Regional economic communities have a place to play because they do the harmonization process. Financing has a role to play. Private sector has a role to play. So what we're doing, and I'll close off there, is asking ourselves the question, who are the partners that understand the market entry strategies? And how do we work with them? It takes us into a new territory, a different territory, perhaps one which even our instruments are not necessarily suited for at this moment. But it's the kind of jacket we will have to expand if we're to have impact in terms of rising volume of intra-African trade. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. Let me come here to Gabi. There was a very important point that was made by the gentleman there who said that integration cannot happen without ownership. You could tackle that.
I think it's absolutely true, in a sense that if we're going to get this single market going, the African must understand that it is to his or her benefit. I think that's where the ownership conversation starts. Okay? And it's for that reason that we started this Make Africa Borderless Now movement. And our argument is pretty simple. Since 1963, our leaders have been talking about uniting Africa since 1963. And they had what they call the Lagos Plan of Action back in, was it 1981? I think, yes. Lagos Plan of Action, and then eventually they met in Abuja in, what was it, 1991, and then agreed on a plan. And they all ratified it by 1994 and gave themselves 34 years, which ends in 2028. That by 2028, they will have a single currency. They will have free movement of people, goods, services. They have a single central bank. They will have a customs union, which means things can move from one African country to the other without any checks. And I think when they did this in 1994, they ratified it. They didn't think that they were going to be around. So they sign, and then they go to sleep, essentially. That's what our leaders have been doing all this while. They will sign and commit themselves to it on paper and then go to sleep. But it's 2 years, we're 3 years away from the implementation, full implementation of the Abuja Treaty. It was the Abuja Treaty that gave rise to the African Union, because when they met in SET in 1999, they thought that the OAU was not strong enough or fit for purpose. That's why they created the African Union. But how far have they gone in implementing the very treaties and protocols that they themselves signed up to? And say,
I think it's important to separate two things. That time, the Organization of African Unity was more about liberation, and now they needed to move into a new phase.
Thank you for that clarification. But that's why I said they wanted something that was fit for purpose. Yes, so the AU is supposed to be fit for purpose. But how far have they gone? It was through that they came up with what? The African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And 2 months before they signed that in Kigali, they had met in Addis Ababa, where they adopted the free movement of people, goods and services, free movement of people, settlement, right of settlement, and right of establishment. And they signed that protocol. Now, you can't have economic integration without free movement. But it may surprise you to know that whilst they all rushed to sign up and adopt and ratify the AfCFTA agreement, only 4 countries have ratified the free movement protocol. 4 countries out of 54, 55 that we have. And it needs at least 15 countries for it to be enforced. Now, how? So the thing is, I think that's where the ownership should come in. If for a continent that we are churning out between 8 to 10 or 11 million young people into the job market, I believe about 18 million, yes, about 18 million every year. And then our
12 million, you're right. Yes.
Yes, about 18 to 20 million every year. And our economies can create enough jobs for between 8 to 10 million. So we have a situation where if we are not careful and we don't come to grips with the fact that our fragmented markets are not big enough to create the jobs that our young people need. And if our young people understand that this is what needs to be done, and then the fact that our leaders have signed up to them, what they have failed to do is to enforce the very things that they themselves have signed up to. So that's where I think the ownership comes in. Then the African people should say that, look, we are asking you to just implement the very treaties and protocols you yourselves have signed up to. It's that simple. I'll give you an example. 2024, they met again in Addis Ababa. Okay, some of us all were part of the lobbying. And then quickly they signed the AfCFTA Digital Trade Protocol. Now, a key aspect of this digital trade protocol is to allow seamless payments across the continent. Have they implemented it? No. But then when you look at it, that the value of the mobile money transaction globally, what happened in 2025 was $2.1 trillion US. That was the total value of mobile money transaction. And we all know that mobile money has brought financial inclusivity to our continent in a way that we've never seen or never envisaged. Okay? But within the $2.1 trillion US transaction value last year, about 1.4 trillion was just in Africa. So within Africa, within our fragmented economies, monies were being transacted electronically to the value of 1.4 trillion. Now imagine if that young fashion designer in Abidjan can put her stuff on Instagram, and then someone in Kenya can see it and use just their mobile money wallet to buy it using their Kenyan shillings. And then you receive it, your money here, with your Ivorian sefa. Then we start doing that trade. So what is it? Is the courage, the political courage to implement the very things that can get us going. That is missing. And that's why I think that the African people, particularly the young people, must own this integration narrative. They should know that it is in their interest that we forget about these our borders that we inherited and so somehow protect them, and they are actually arresting our prosperity, drive for prosperity and development. If we don't wake up to that, we will not get to where we are.
Briefly, how do young people own this? You say they should own, but how do they do it? Just briefly.
Okay, so what we are planning, what we are doing, and with the support of the AfDB as well, and others, is that we just come up with a petition. Make Africa borderless now. Sign up. We have about 125,000 people sign up. We want like millions of Africans to sign. Just all you do is go online and then sign www.makeafricaborderlessnow.com. And then in February, when they meet at the AU, if we're able to gather as many signatures, we go to them and tell our leaders that, hey, the people themselves are saying the very things that you have agreed to do, just do it so that we can unleash our entrepreneurial skills, so that we can move freely, we can trade freely, and we can prosper freely. I think that's essentially what it's all about.
No, thank you so much for that, Gabi Asare. Let me go to Dr. Ribeiro. The question around the West African Development Plan, and you may also touch on any other point that was raised here and we've not been able to touch on in regard to ownership or having access to markets. You already touched on the security in the Sahel, so that's done. So yes, on the West African plan and the census, because we don't know how many people there are, how do we plan for anything?
Merci, Solomon. Je pense qu'on peut saluer vraiment l'excellence des questions. On voit qu'on a un public averti et nous vous remercions pour toutes ces questions. Concernant le recensement, ça touche directement au troisième point cardinal sur comment faire de la population une dividende. Mais on ne peut pas en faire une dividende si on ne sait pas quelle est la population, où est-ce qu'ils sont sur le territoire. Un exemple, comment la BAD aide. En 2021, il y a eu un recensement général de la population et de l'habitat ici en Côte d'Ivoire, financé par la BAD, avec le pilotage technique du Fonds des Nations Unies pour la population. Donc, c'est un schéma que nous pouvons mettre en œuvre dans tous les pays. Maintenant, il faut qu'il y ait la volonté politique et la décision politique de la mettre en œuvre. Dernièrement, on a parlé avec le Congo démocratique pour faire la même chose. Donc, nous sommes parfaitement outillés pour ce faire et il n'y a aucun problème si nous sommes sollicités par les États. Il a été question de l'insertion sociale des projets et l'acceptation sociale. Vous savez qu'en amont des projets, il y a beaucoup de communication, il y a des études socio-économiques qui sont faites, on envoie des enquêteurs parler aux gens sur le terrain, mais concrètement, quand la BAD arrive pour réaliser, nous faisons ce que nous appelons les aménagements connexes. Aujourd'hui, sur un projet, mettons un projet de route, au moins 15% du budget doit être consacré aux aménagements connexes, qui peuvent être des dispensaires, des écoles, des marchés, etc. Donc, tout ce qui permet de faire de la route un corridor économique de développement. Donc, on ne parle plus de route, mais de corridor économique de développement à travers les aménagements connexes. Et on mesure ça comment? C'est qu'aujourd'hui, selon les directives de notre président, tout projet doit avoir un quota de production d'emploi pour les jeunes. Et l'emploi pour les jeunes, ça se fait par le projet et les aménagements connexes. Donc, ce sont des choses qui aident à l'acceptation sociale du projet si en amont, il y a eu une bonne communication. Et nous pensons que nous avons de bons exemples à partager. Pour les projets de l'Union africaine, bon, il va sans dire que nous finançons des projets qui sont priorisés par l'Union africaine en général. La BAD met en œuvre beaucoup de volets infrastructures de l'Union africaine. Par exemple, nous gérons ici le fonds NEPAD-IPPF, qui est un fonds de préparation de projets pour les projets reliés à l'Union africaine. Nous sommes le bras armé du programme d'infrastructure, le PIDA. Donc, soyez sûrs que nous fonctionnons en concertation avec l'Union africaine pour financer les projets qu'ils ont priorisés. Pour ce qui est de l'évaluation du document d'intégration régionale Afrique de l'Ouest, oui, on a fait une évaluation cette année en 2026. Et d'ailleurs, ce qui est ressorti, c'est deux choses. Comment préserver les acquis d'intégration, parce qu'il y a des acquis, j'en ai cité tout à l'heure, et comment continuer à avoir des acquis dans l'environnement qui est très défiant à l'heure actuelle. Donc, cette évaluation est disponible. Nous avons passé au crible 116 projets. On a 116 projets régionaux en Afrique de l'Ouest qui représentent, qui sont en cours de mise en œuvre, qui représentent autour de 2,4 milliards de dollars. Donc, ces informations sont disponibles. Enfin, je voulais toucher le point sur la mise en œuvre de projets dans un cadre d'insécurité. C'est très sensible parce que il faut être créatif. D'abord, ce que nous faisons là-bas ne finance pas tout ce qui est moyen de défense. Ça va de soi. Par contre, nous pouvons créer l'espace budgétaire aux États pour qu'ils en prennent soin. Donc, nous prenons le maximum de financement et eux, ils prennent en charge la sécurisation des points avec des brigades qui sont formées et sous l'égide des autorités. Ce que nous faisons également, c'est que nous mettons en œuvre les projets par module, de façon que si on a plusieurs modules sur le territoire et que pour une raison ou une autre, on ne peut pas faire ce module-là, on pourra le déplacer ailleurs. Donc, c'est une flexibilité qui est construite. Ce que nous faisons également, c'est la préparation et la supervision des projets de façon distancielle. Nous avons un outil, le RASP, qui permet d'évaluer et de superviser les projets à distance, donc qui est aussi un outil qui est mis en œuvre. Nous avons des partenaires, donc aujourd'hui la BAD met beaucoup l'emphase sur le partenariat pour aller plus vite. Parce qu'il est clair qu'avec tout ce qu'on dit sur le monde, qu'on ne peut plus se permettre d'aller lentement. On doit aller plus vite et à plus grande échelle. Et pour ce faire, il nous faut travailler ensemble. Donc nous faisons appel à des partenaires qui ont des mécanismes qui sont plus implantés au niveau micro dans les territoires pour qu'on puisse intervenir et faciliter la mise en œuvre des projets. Donc, c'est tout un faisceau d'outils qui fait que je pense que nous avons quelques succès. Et enfin, je voudrais souligner que nos projets sont très bien documentés désormais avec l'appui de notre département SNDR. Lors des assemblées annuelles, vous avez vu l'exemple de la géolocalisation des bénéfices des projets, notamment du 2PI Bélier ici, qui a montré à quel point les projets de la BAD, on peut aller au niveau micro et changer la vie des personnes. Et ça, on compte le faire à grande échelle avec le maximum de projets possibles et en faisant intervenir beaucoup de jeunes, toujours dans l'optique de créer de l'emploi pour les jeunes. Merci.
No, thank you so much for that. And as you're saying, Dr. Ribeiro, to go faster, to scale up, we have to work together. We had also in responses from Dr. Joy Kategekwa telling us about our individual roles in driving this regional integration train. And we wonder at what speed are we traveling? Is it still, is it electric or what is it? It's our responsibility. And of course, we've heard from one of the participants here and Gabi here saying integration can't happen without public ownership and free movement of goods. So, I mean, of people, this is very important. I know these discussions are going to continue because I know right now you need a break, you need some coffee. I know your minds are stimulated. You want to get into more discussions, and I don't want to be the person standing between you, your coffee, and that exciting discussion you want to carry on from here henceforth. And as one of the things I just want to put in here is what the Evaluator General of the Independent Development Evaluation, that is Karen Roth-Munsterman, said earlier on about reliable information. Because we don't have reliable information about our countries, and that information crossing the borders through believable channels, then nobody will ever know which opportunities, investment opportunities, trade opportunities exist in each African country. And this is one of the things we are also discussing, Dr. Kategekwa may remember, the role of the media, the African media. How do we make sure we are showcasing opportunities in each country beyond our own capital cities, beyond our own villages, right across the border? On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'm told there's a fantastic exhibition on the just the floor up as you go for your coffee. There is an exhibition there where you can actually go and network, and you'll find a wide range of publications, reports, evaluations, and of course, practical knowledge resources that you can explore. And that space has been actually designed for that purpose, for you to learn and share experiences and ideas. It's a really good creative area or innovative area for you to go and try some of those ideas and share them and see where they go to next. Let's give a round of applause to our panel here, Dr. Joy Kategekwa. Here we had Gabi Asaro Cheredako from the Africa Prosperity Network. Big round of applause. And of course, Dr. Joseph Ribeiro, a colleague here at the bank. Again, let's appreciate what they've just done with us And to all of you and those online, thank you so much. And I've been your moderator this morning. My name is Solomon Ngera. Again, I work with the bank as the Communication and External Relations Director. Have a very good morning or good afternoon. Thank you.